Since things can come in different units explaining the same dimension, I could have something that's a length and I could measure it in feet, but I might want it in inches or miles or meters or kilometers or millimeters or any other number of ways to describe a length. And so I need to be able to know how to convert from one type of unit to the next type of unit. Now, part of your first homework assignment was to save a unit conversion chart into your Google Drive folder. So I know that you have one there, but you can also look them up online. So if you just go to a browser and you search unit conversion chart, there's going to be a whole lot of them. And you can kind of choose which one you want, which one works best for you. They're all slightly different form, but use the one that works for you. Number one, make sure that it has the conversions you want on it. But number two, make sure you understand how the chart works. I pulled off just one of these conversions, and that is 1 inch equals 2.54 centimeters. And when you look at these charts, a lot of times it's going to be something along these lines where one thing equals another thing in some other unit. So if I want to turn 5.3 inches into centimeters, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to use some math and then some conversion factor to do this. And so I've given you the conversion factor here. And now we're going to talk about how to work through this process. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the number and the units that are given, which is 5.3 inches. Now what I want to be really careful with here is I don't want to change my actual value. At the end of it, my pencil, let's say, is 5.3 inches long. I just want to know what that same length is in centimeters. I don't want to change this into being 10 inches long, or I don't want to shrink it down to being 2 inches long. It's still 5.3 inches. I just want to explain it in a different way. Since I'm going to be multiplying this 5.3 inches by some conversion factor, what can that number be? If I multiply it by something bigger than 1, then it's going to be bigger than 1.3 inches. And if I multiply it by something smaller than by 1, then it's going to be smaller than 5.13. So really the only thing that I can do is multiply 5.3 inches by 1. But that doesn't seem to do anything, because we know that if we multiply anything by 1, then I just get that same number back, that 5.3 inches. So now let's look at our conversion factor. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this conversion factor that we have here, this 1 inch equals 2.54 centimeters, and I'm going to do a little bit of algebra with it. In this first case down here, I divided both sides of this factor by 2.54 centimeters. And when I did that, I get 1 inch over 2.54 centimeters equals 1. Or I could do it the other way around and divide both sides by 1 inch, and I get that 1 equals 2.54 centimeters over 1 inch. So at this point you might see, oh, this is making sense, or you still might say, I'm not quite seeing where you're going with this. That's perfectly fine. Either way, because I'm going to tell you where I'm going with this. What I can do right now is one of the most important things that you can do in math, and that is a substitution. If 1 inch over 2.54 centimeters equals 1, that means anywhere in the world where I need a 1, I can plug in 1 inch over 2.54 centimeters. Or I could plug in the other one, which is 2.54 centimeters over 1 inch. So when I do that, I get one of these two situations. What we're going to do at this point is we're going to make sure that we keep track of our units very, very carefully, and we follow all of our mathematic rules. All I've done at this point is substituted. So if we were to do this, not going to let me draw. There we go. If I were to do this here, what I would get is I would get 5.3 inches times 1 inch. I'd end up with inches squared on the top. And if I were to do the same thing on the bottom, I would have inches centimeters would be on the bottom. So for this first one, I'd have inches squared over centimeters. If I were to do this bottom one, I would have inches times centimeters over inches. Anytime I have a unit on the top and a unit on the bottom that are the same, they cancel out. So when I'm done here, if I choose this bottom method, my final answer is going to be in centimeters. And you can go through and you can calculate that and see what that answer would be. But we have to make sure that we keep track of our units, that we do our math properly, and that we really understand how to use our fractions. Now I'm going to teach you a shortcut. Normally I hate teaching people shortcuts because then they don't really understand the math behind it. But this would get really monotonous if every single time you get a conversion factor, you switch it to the other side, you made it a 1, you had to do a substitution, you worked through it. And so what I do is I do want to show you a shortcut, and I have these steps here. So here's my example. I want to turn 70,930 seconds into days. First step, right? The original number is a fraction, keeping units. Number 2, find a conversion factor, and you might need multiple conversion factors. You're going to multiply the starting number fraction by a factor, by one of those conversion factors you found, that has the same units that your number has, your original number. You're going to put the term of this factor that has the same units on the opposite position. So if seconds is on the top of your original number, seconds on your factor is going to be on the bottom. And then you're going to put the other term, the blank spot of your fraction, you're going to put the other side of your factor. You're going to cross out units. You're going to repeat these steps 3 through 6, making sure that the new factor has units that will cancel with the remaining units. Once the desired units are then remaining and nothing else is, then you can multiply the fraction, simplify, and write the units. Now, those steps don't seem a whole lot till we work through something, so let's work through something. I'm going to write down some factors. I am just going to rewrite the problem because I like to look at the problem a little bit differently. Seconds into days. So I like to look at it like that, other than the fact that it's sloppy. All right, so the next thing I do is I need to come up with some conversion factors. And if you're not sure what conversion factors to use, you can always go to a conversion chart. And this conversion chart here comes from the book Thinking Like an Engineer. I like this one. It's a pretty good chart. And we have our time factors here. One thing to note, you'll see that some of these are bold and some of them aren't. For this chart, the bold ones mean that they are a perfect definition. So 1 day is defined as 24 hours. 1 hour is 60 minutes. 1 minute is 60 seconds. But 1 year isn't exactly 365 days. It's a little bit different than that. And so it's important to know whether something is exact or not. I'm going to write these down. I have 1 minute equals 60 seconds. I have 1 hour equals 60 minutes. And I have 1 day equals 24 hours. So now I've done, I found my conversion factors. I'm going to write my original number as a fraction. And since there's no other piece to this, I'm just going to put it over 1. That makes it a fraction. Now I want to multiply this starting number, my starting fraction here, I want to multiply it by one of these conversion factors. And I'm not sure maybe which one to use yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this original number and see that I want to cancel out seconds. So I go to my factor and I find one of them that has seconds in it and I choose it. Mine just so happens to be in the correct order. It's on the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply this fraction by this conversion factor, but instead of having to go through and move the 60 seconds over, have that be a 1 and figure out which way to work, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this and say, well, I want to cancel out seconds. And to cancel out seconds, that means wherever I put this new conversion factor fraction, seconds needs to be on the bottom. And to do that, or when I do that, seconds will cancel out because they're on opposite spots in my fraction. So the second side is 60, so I put my 60 seconds on the bottom, which means this blank spot on the top is 1 minute. What I'm going to do at that point is I'm going to cross out the things that don't work. Now, do I want minutes? Is that the last thing that I want? And I go back up here and I say, no, I want days. So I'm not done yet. I want to cancel something else out. And so what I want to cancel out is, and I should be putting parentheses on here, I just like to keep it neat, showing these little packets of information. I want to cancel out minutes. So I go back up here and I find one that has minutes, and that's going to help me cancel out minutes, and in this case, turn minutes into hours. So I make another fraction. Since I want to cancel out minutes, and minutes on the top here, I put minutes on the bottom here. So 60 minutes. And the other part of my conversion factor is 1 hour, so I put that on the top. My minutes cancel. And I'm left with hour. Is hour what I want? No, it's not. It means that I do this again. Like number 7 here says, I repeat. So I'm going to repeat it again. I'm going to multiply this by a conversion factor. I want to get rid of hours. Hours is on the top, so I put 24 hours on the bottom. And I put 1 day on the top. And then I cancel out my hours, and I'm left with day. Is day what I want? Yes, it is. So now what I do is I'm going to go ahead and multiply this through. And so when I multiply the top through, I get 70930 days over what's 60 times 60 times 24? 86,400. Well, we're not done quite yet. We should simplify this. So let's go ahead and simplify. And if I do the division here, I get 0.820949, lots and lots of stuff, days. So where do I cut this off? We could use our significant figures. And remember that all these conversion factors that we used were considered perfect. And so those, in essence, have an infinite number of significant figures. So an infinite number of significant figures there, infinite number of significant figures, infinite number of significant figures. They're perfect. They're a definition. I don't have to worry about them if it's a perfect definition. In this case, how many significant figures do I have? I'll give you a second to think about it. We have 4 significant figures. And so that means my answer only can have 4 significant figures. And so if I rewrite this, it would be 0.8209 days. All right, now for this and the other example that we did, we only had one thing that we had to cancel out. In this one, it was a time unit, and we had to do it a few times, but it was still just one time unit. And that thing we wanted to cancel was always on the top. That's not always going to happen. There will be times where I have to have a unit on the bottom I want to get rid of. If that's the case, I still just make sure that the thing I'm trying to cancel is opposite. And so if I wanted to get rid of seconds, if it was on the bottom, I would have put seconds on top in my conversion factor. We're going to have another video where I'm going to give you some questions that you can work on, and then we'll work on those in another video to show you the answers.